Welcome to Whole CEO with Lisa G. I'm the best-selling author of The Boss Weight Loss. I'm bringing you the top tips to be unstoppable. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually pull up a chair with today's top experts in mindset, weight loss, business, and more. Learn our top tips so that you can have more energy, be fit and resilient, feel unstoppable, unshakable, and unbreakable. He's the podcast host of a top Apple Charts show, the Self-Esteem Confidence Mindset, focusing on getting people to go after what they want and share more of themselves, not holding themselves back. He's also a confidence and podcast coach and 7-time author, Jonny Pardoe. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Lisa. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you inviting me on your show.
Well, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I know we connected on LinkedIn. So let's jump right into the topic here. How important is daily psychology work?
Psychology is so important in terms of going throughout life and actually believing in ourselves, because there are going to be lots of challenges. Now, people talk a lot about mindset and psychology. So the difference between the two, I actually learned from one guy I've sort of been working for, who's one of Tony Robbins' kind of lead speakers, Joseph McClendon. And he says mindset is more about your specific attitude towards something. You can have different mindset. You can have a money mindset. You can have a health mindset. You can have certain mindsets towards your relationships. It's your attitude towards something. But your psychology is the ongoing thought processes consciously and subconsciously going around in your mind. And actually, we've got to be very careful about the information we're feeding ourselves, what we're saying to ourselves, who we're hanging out with, what we're listening to, what we're reading, because that really fuels our psychology and how we feel. So if you're loading your mind with negative things, like negative people who put you down, or maybe they're not putting you down, but they're putting life down, perhaps you're listening to, I always say this, but listening to the news too often, and you get very anxious. You're going to get very anxious, very down. Then you're not going to feel as good. Now, if you're listening to uplifting podcasts or uplifting talks on YouTube, or perhaps reading some good books, then you're going to feel better about yourself. And also the words you say to yourself are going to be so key. Like if you say I am hopeless, that's going to make you feel completely different than if you say I am awesome or I am growing, for example. So it's really, really key that particularly the words we say and the information we take in that fuels our psychology is really, really becomes more conscious to us. And we make more of a conscious effort to work on our psychology every single day.
I agree with you. It's so important, the power of words in our daily psychology. In other words, how we feel about ourselves and what we're feeding our brain. So what do we need to do to take action so that we're in positive mindset and psychology every single day?
Well, one thing I'll say is we're never going to be 100% in a positive place all the time. There's always going to be chances when a negative life event comes along, and that's life. And it's something that I'm kind of going off on one a little bit here, but if you're relying on certainty and going to feel good and everything has to be in a certain way in life, you're not going to have a good quality of life, because life's not like that. A great quote that I hear from some of the great thought leaders. I follow people like Peter Sage, who I know you like as well. People like Tony Robbins, who I've been to multiple events, always say the quality of your life is in direct proportion to your ability to live in uncertainty. And particularly as entrepreneurs like us, you've got to live with a degree of uncertainty.
Oh my God, absolutely. Especially in a pandemic.
But yeah, absolutely. But like the pandemic, like people think, oh, pandemic's over, now life's going to be more certain. No, life like never ever certain. Like you
Never.
can't have a job for life. You can't, guarantee as much as it, this might hit people, but there's no guarantee there's going to be a relationship for life. There's no guarantee you're going to have X amount in the bank. It's just when we sort of realize that, and obviously work on ourselves and realize the certainty we can have is in ourselves rather than external factors we can't control, that becomes really, really key. Now, sort of, I went on a tangent there, but it does relate to the question, what can we do in terms of developing that strong feeling on a more regular basis?
Yeah.
There's a great poem that I like, and it is, my thoughts are just a mixture of constant words and pictures. So the words and the pictures we're filling ourselves up with. And it kind of comes back to what I was saying. So saying some of the things out loud to yourself is going to go back into your mind, like consciously and subconsciously, like
Yeah.
saying, I am awesome. Also, even saying, how are you today? I say, how are you today, Lisa? And you say, I'm all right. As opposed to, I'm feeling awesome, is going to create a completely different feeling.
Absolutely.
So the words we say, we've got to be very conscious. Now, what I like to particularly get clients to do in my confidence coaching is create an identity of strong words. And as human beings, we tend to want to be consistent with how we define ourselves and our identity. Now, if we've gone for a lifetime of saying I'm a worthless, useless piece of junk, we're going to behave like that, and that's going to carry on. But then if we create empowering things, like some of the words I describe myself as with are, I'm an ecstatic, energetic, magnetic leader. And those kind of things set, like, maybe there's the odd person out there who might disagree, but the fact I'm telling myself that every day allows me to behave like that and actually have a better impact on other people around me, because I've got more drive. So the words you say, just be conscious about the words you say, create a strong identity. But also the pictures is the other aspect, I say. And these are things like, I'm a big fan of doing some visualization. I mean, the book Think and Grow Rich was a huge influence of my life, the traditional one, and actually making some time to visualize what I want and focus more on what I want rather than what I don't, and actually seeing myself sometimes, if I'm going on maybe a big podcast, or I've spoken and stuff like that, when I'm a bit nervous, visualizing, seeing myself going through that is really, really key. So those are a couple of things I can think of to kind of start going. Obviously, I like to make it very relevant to the individual, but making sure you're focusing on the words you're saying to yourself, and also the images you're feeding your mind as well.
I love all of your advice. I've listened to Marissa Peer, and as you know, she talks also
Yeah,
too
I just
about
come off that.
the words that you say and the power of words and in the pictures in your mind. And I'm a big believer in visualization, vision board, and I love the book Think and Grow Rich. I'm so glad you brought that up. It stands the test of time. It's been around forever, and I really love that book. And I want to know, why do we need to take courageous actions?
Courageous action. Well, in terms of, this is something I learned from sort of learning from some, thought leaders that I'd learned from, but actually from my own experience. When we sort of, I tended to feel most alive, and actually what I found from other people is they have this growth and contribution in their life, rather than just, being on self and worrying about themselves too much. And actually, to grow, you need to stop doing the same things over and over again. And for me, I don't know, I guess I'm fortunate that I've always had such a strong drive for growth. In a sense, even though the reason I started the self-esteem and confidence mindset, because I used to have even though I had ambition, I had a real poor opinion of myself. But in terms of taking courageous action, you need that to grow, and that really helps you feel alive. Now, in terms of actually becoming confident as well, you don't just suddenly become confident one day. And that's a real big misconception that annoys me, because I used to believe it myself, and it's an absolute lie. I was telling myself that,
Yeah.
and it kind of keeps people in a suffering state that, oh, confident people are just confident. They're just like born like that. No, that's absolute lies. It's, you become confident by doing courage, by being courageous. And courage is not the absence of fear. It's having the fear, but doing it anyway. Like there's a great book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Yes.
Very famously quoted. So in order to build your confidence and actually grow, that's why we need to take courageous action.
I love that. And push ourselves outside of our regular comfort zone in order to build confidence.
Absolutely. And one thing I'd add to that as well that I didn't say is, pulling yourself out of the comfort zone is when people think of putting yourself out of the comfort zone, it doesn't mean doing a hugely scary thing like that's going to terrify you, like your worst fear. It can just be little steps. Like if you're terrified of heights, don't just suddenly try and go skydiving because it's not going to happen. It's just going to paralyze you of fear and you just won't do it. And then you're just going to kick yourself for it. But we're talking about like little steps. So I'll use my own personal life for example, because even with like clients, I always use examples of my life because I don't just talk theory. So like I was terrified of even saying my name in a meeting at one point. Now I do like 7 podcasts a week on shows and all sorts, lead senior meetings and all sorts in workplaces. But there's a point, I don't know, about 5-6 years ago, where I was even terrified of saying my name in a meeting. I got really self-conscious, go red, just hide away from it. Now, for me, there was a point where I went, I can't continue with this. And actually, that was one thing I realized I was doing right, looking back on it without realizing that actually I looked at the pain of staying the same as opposed to the pain of coming out of the comfort zone. I didn't even realize I was on my personal growth journey, but I realized I was doing that correctly. And I sort of did little things like give a small update to a small team, and then I'd do like a slightly bigger update, and I did more and more. And I remember presenting in front of directors, and like I remember my like legs shaking, and it's like now I think that'd be absolutely ridiculous. But bless my younger self. Obviously, I was in that state, but now I'd be like, walk into it and just explain my view and stuff like that. But it was just those little steps of coming out of the comfort zone. And that's what I really want to say, that again, like going back to the point, courage is not the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear, but doing it anyway. And you don't have to do a massive jump to come out of the comfort zone. You can take little steps of momentum because momentum builds progress and confidence.
Well, I love the way you explained not having to jump off a tall building if you're afraid of heights and taking small steps, because I can relate. I mean, when I first started public speaking, I was petrified, and it's still not my comfort zone, but I felt the same way you do, that staying the same was too painful. So I started going to Toastmasters and giving talks there.
Same. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same. So much in common. Yeah,
That
I did the same
helped
as well.
me. And then I just started doing it anyway. I started doing interviews, and I've done over 150 different interviews in my life. And I started doing it live every week. And I feel like I'm my own biggest critic. I go on there and I know if I look at one from a year ago, 2 years ago, I didn't look comfortable, and I wasn't comfortable, but I've been doing it for 5 years. So I just feel like facing that fear was my only choice, and doing it little step at a time, I think is wonderful. Would that be like what you would consider a courageous habit?
Yeah, definitely. Like courage doesn't have to be like fighting a bear, for example. It's like, I haven't
Thank
done
you.
that, by the way.
I have no interest in bear fighting.
No, nor do I. But that just linked to a very relevant point. Our brain, in those situations, the survival part of the brain will go into that kind of flight or flight response mode because it's trying to keep you alive. Now, sometimes when you're doing things like public speak, which is a huge fear, it's like one of the top fears for like human beings. And I read the book, The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker, which it was interesting. It explains that it leads somehow it leads people to the think of loss of identity, therefore survival. And actually that survival brain's like looking at looking bad on stage or whatever, it starts thinking, what if I look bad? That therefore links to my survival. And, you know, it really doesn't. But, you know, the survival brain doesn't know that. But when it's in those, like, if it was in the situation, I hope we don't have to fight a bear anytime soon, it would quite rightly be reacting that way. But sometimes the brain reacts in those situations, like public speaking, like it's life or death.
Like
Because
fight
that's
or
what it
flight
does. But
kind of thing. Like, yeah. And I agree with you. I mean, to me, I was like, I even made myself take acting classes, and I just felt like I just had to push through that fear. And
absolutely.
I love all your tidbits so far about pushing outside of your comfort zone, courageous habits, and how important are the people that you pick up.
Yeah, definitely. So I talked a little bit about the information we're like taking, because it's always going into our mind. And I just had a conversation with someone who's a self-development app owner actually, and we were talking about this as well. But um, basically, like, you're always taking in information that's going to, even if you don't notice it, that's going to determine how you feel. And some great people, like you mentioned, Marissa Peer, um, Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, some great names talk about the subconscious mind. And actually that drives the majority of your behavior. So if you're constantly bombarding it with negative information, like I said, the news or whatever, you're not going to feel good or have much belief in yourself. And that's the way you talk to yourself. But the people in your life, that's the same. I've heard this so many times that I don't even want to say this, but I think it's important to say this. You're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with. You probably heard that on every podcast interview or quite a lot of podcast interviews recently, but it's just like very, very true. And I'm reading a couple of books right now. One of them's called Willpower. Well, listening to one and reading the other. One book's called Willpower Doesn't Work. And that's by a guy called Benjamin Hardy, that demonstrates this point that,
I love
like,
Ben
yeah,
Hardy. I agree with that concept too. Keep
he's
going.
awesome. Yeah. Like, a lot of us try and do this willpower of like, oh, I'm trying, but why do I keep self-sabotaging myself and going backwards? And, we've all been there. We've all been like self-sabotaging at some point. But it's just like your environment is key. So, I mean, the book goes through a whole lot of environmental things. Like, I've got a lockbox to put my wallet away, for example, so that I don't go to. Fortunately, but unfortunately, I live in the city centre where there's like, I won't put my cupboards with bad food, but I've got lots of coffee shop and treats around me, so I put my wallet, and I don't have. Someone gave me the idea. Why don't you put your wallet on your phone? And I went, why do I do that? I'm trying to avoid spending money in these places. So I got a lockbox. But anyway, the book's a really good book. I definitely recommend checking out. But it talks about the people you're hanging out with. And actually that plays an impact on how you feel. And Ben Hardy was talking about his friend who somehow sabotaged himself, had a really great life, but he discovered it was because he was hanging out with a real negative friend who was lazy and just ate junk food, negative view on life. And then suddenly the Ben Hardy's friend, not the lazy one, but basically started becoming lazy and started sabotaging his life, just because he started hanging out with this guy 3 or 4 times a week. And in my own life, I can relate to it as well. Like, sometimes well-intentioned, like nice enough people, I'm pretty good. I've never really let anyone toxic in my life, fortunately. Usually I had quite a good awareness from a young age. Again, sort of probably picked up from parents, but I've had people who, just don't believe in entrepreneurship, even though they mean well, they're great people, but, like, discussing it around with them, they're like, that sounds a bit dodgy. And then you've got other friends who just, I haven't really got those kind of friends, but I've had people in the past who like talk negatively about life, or maybe they put themselves down and you start feeling down as well. So again, it's what you're picking up. But if you've got uplifting people like our community we're part of in LinkedIn, who
I
always
love
like,
our community
I love
of
it.
everyone
Yeah.
so like-minded.
Yeah. So encouraging. You get energy off each other. You're going to feel better about yourself. So yeah, again, it's the impact it has your mind, because that's going to impact on your behavior, even if you don't consciously recognize it at first.
Okay, well, I love all of your tips. And where can people find more of the great Jonny Pardoe if they want help with podcasting or confidence or any of your information?
Yeah, of course. So, and thanks for having me again, Lisa. I appreciate it. So, yeah, I'm on most social media platforms. Instagram, I'm pretty active on. LinkedIn, of course, I'm active on. My Instagram's at Jonny.Pardoe. My LinkedIn's just Jonny Pardoe, as well as the same as my Facebook. And also, yeah, there's my podcast as well, which is the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset. So those are probably the main ones where I'll be hanging out anyway. So again, I appreciate our chat, and that's where people can find me.
Thanks, Jonny. Thanks for being a great guest.
Thanks for coming to Whole CEO with Lisa G. After over 20 years helping people lose weight and get fit, I'm so excited to announce that I found the missing link with my coaching. Message me if you want to learn how to look better, feel better, and go faster with a master. Lisa G at lisagfit.com.